Please welcome Principal, Altimeter Group, Charlene Lee.
Thank you very much. So who are you going to be? Who are you going to be when disruption comes calling, when it comes knocking on your door? Because the question here isn't if it's coming or when it's coming. It is here and it's knocking on the door, and the question will be, well, who are you going to be? Because the reality is, disruption is here. And you have to be able to face it, and you have to be ready. And this requires a certain type of leadership, because your companies will be going through a huge disruptive change. How disruptive? Let's look at some of the data. The data shows that the average lifetime of a company on the S&P 500 has been decreasing rapidly. Back in 1965, it was 33 years. By 2027, it'll be 12 years. So what are the things that you can do to ensure that this doesn't happen to you? So who are you going to be? Will you be a disruption victim, or will you be the disruption victor? In order to ensure that you're going to be that victor, there are a couple things that you have to do, and I think the most important one is to face the uncomfortable truths. The uncomfortable truth is that your organization is probably not ready. It doesn't have the strategy, the technology, the people, the culture, the leadership to be able to be that victor. And in my research now, as an analyst and as an author, I've discovered that there are 3 common things that companies need to have. They need to have the strategy, the culture, and the leadership. And what I'd like to do today is to go through those very briefly to give you an idea of what does that mean to have each of these 3 things to ensure that you're the victor. Let's take strategy first of all. I'm often asked as an analyst and as, again, having done research in this space, what's the new disruptive technology we have to have? What's that innovation that's going to be the key that unlocks that growth? And what I find is that it's often not a new technology. It's usually an existing technology used and applied in new and different ways. And what's the hardest thing for organizations to realize is that the strategy can't be focused on that technology. It has to be focused on a customer need. And frankly, it's not even the customer need of today. It's your customers of the future. But you may be asking, I don't know who those customers are even. I don't even know what they look like. And this is where the process of design thinking, of aligning everyone around those unmet needs is so important. Because when you can understand the data and along the way figure out and co-design that vision together of what that future holds, then you'll have the confidence to leave the present behind. And I love what Sarah Blakely, who's the CEO and founder of Spanx, likes to say about this. She says, don't be intimidated by what you don't know, because the adventure here is really about what is in the future, because then that allows you to think and to act differently than everyone else. Because in the end, do you really want to be doing what your competitors are doing already today? And that's going to guide your future? In reality, what you need to do is to carve a new path. Your strategy needs to be independent of what is going on today and focus completely on that future customer need. Now, what I found also that culture is a really big part of this. Having studied so many transformations inside of organizations, what we find is that you could have the most beautiful strategy crafted and worked out to the tiniest details, but if your culture isn't able to adopt and change and pursue that path, it's of no use. But if your culture is strong, it's healthy and aligned, then even the weakest strategy can be improved upon as you get better and better information about what that future looks like. So what is culture in the end? Culture is simply the way that we get work done around here. And in many ways, culture is defined by our beliefs and our behaviors. How do we work? How do we believe that we should work with each other? And how do we build trust with each other so that we can move faster and further? In many ways, though, it seems like an impossible task to be able to do the change that you need to have, to create that culture that you need. And it can feel like you're trying to turn in a big ship container. But these ships can be turned. And the question becomes, how quickly can you turn that ship, again, when the situation demands it? What we found in our research is that in the end, it's about the beliefs that you have and the behaviors that in circle together impact each other. So when you can start challenging some of the beliefs that are holding you back, the behaviors will change. And similarly, if you have behaviors that you think are holding you back, by changing those behaviors, your beliefs will change too. And that's how culture change happens. So we looked at strategy. We looked at culture. And I want to give you an example of how one organization really ties those two things together. Southwest Airlines, you probably have flown them. You know that they're a little crazy, really friendly, and really do things very differently. And their strategy is to be the world's largest, friendliest low-cost carrier. And one of the things they do is they let your bags fly free. You get on the plane, your bags get on there with you. 2 bags fly free each time you go with them. And they resisted every single call from Wall Street to charge for those bags because it's not in their strategy, again, to be the low-cost carrier. But what about the friendly part? Well, I just want to show you this picture, which I think just captures it all. Here are the bag handlers at Southwest Airlines, and they have written on their chest, "Bags fly free." And they're sitting there on the tarmac, really wearing their heart on their sleeves, literally on their chests, that they believe in this so much, so that even if they do not see the customers, and very rarely, they have them in their heads. They have it in their culture of the way they get work done. And they are a living and breathing embodiment in that culture of that strategy. So we've talked a little bit about strategy. We've talked about the culture. What about leadership? What about you? Here's the question again. Who are you going to be, and how must you lead differently because of the change that you need to have? If you want to transform and be a smarter leader, how are you going to show up differently tomorrow? Well, let me give you one example here. When T-Mobile became the Un-carrier back in 2013, they had to change everything in their strategy. They believed that in order to serve customers better, they had to be the advocate of that customer. And they realized from all their research that the customers felt just really not taken care of by all the traditional carriers. So they became the Un-carrier. But this wasn't just a tagline. This is something they began living. And it started with their CEO, John Legere. Now, John Legere didn't always look like this. He had not a single piece of magenta in his wardrobe. Now, the only thing he wears is black and bright pink magenta. And one of the things he decided to do was to take this on. He goes, how can I show up differently as a CEO? How am I going to inspire not only my customers, but also my employees and my partners, the entire ecosystem, that we're not like any other carrier. We're the Un-carrier. And things he started doing was, again, wearing magenta, but also going into social media, being much more visible, having a Twitter feed that he would basically respond to anybody who responded to him. He says oftentimes he's on Twitter and other social media like Instagram 4, 6, 8 hours a day in order to connect with customers, to hear what they are saying, to engage with employees, and to wave that T-Mobile flag. He has a cooking show on Sundays, if any of you have watched it, a slow cooker cooking show on Facebook. And it's a mishmash of cooking and promotional activities for the Un-carrier. And all together on his social media, on Twitter, he has more people following him on Twitter than all of the other carriers combined. One person. What does that do to an organization? When you have leadership that is that visible, that behind the strategy, actively building the culture, and then having the leadership behind it to pull all these 3 things together. So my question that I'm going to end with today is the one I began with. Who are you going to be? Who are you going to be when disruption shows up at your door? Who are you going to be tomorrow when you go back into your regular workplace? What kind of leader and what kind of organization do you want to have? So we're going to welcome onto the stage here in just a minute 2 organizations and 2 leaders have decided to be that disruption victor. They have said, we're not going to take this lying down. We're going to grab the bull by the horns and really turn around the strategy and culture, and they're going to lead the way. So please welcome Phil Greedo, General Manager of IBM Infrastructure Services, and Tim Skeen, CIO of Anthem.
Thank you, Charlene, and thank you for setting the stage regarding transformation. Charlene, I was a bit concerned by your chart on the average lifespan of companies on the S&P. It's clearly going in the wrong direction, and we need to find a healthy solution. The messages that Charlene conveyed today, including the importance of leadership and driving cultural change, are exemplified by Tim Skeen's executive leadership. I'm honored to introduce Tim to you. Tim is the Chief Information Officer at Anthem. Anthem is a leader in healthcare solutions in the United States. Tim oversees the IT operations and the next generation of technology, supporting and empowering over 39 million Anthem members with their strategy of consumerism. Tim, thank you for joining us today, I think. A warm welcome for Tim.
Thanks, Phil. I was getting a little worried when I first got here. On Monday, they told me that I might be competing directly against Joe Montana, so I thought there wasn't going to be anybody out there. So I'm actually feeling pretty good, because there's a few, there's a decent crowd, that's good. And then I was wondering, is it worse, because now I'm following the superstar, and now it's going to be a big letdown for everybody. But really happy to be here, happy to be a longtime partner with IBM. Just to give you a little bit of an idea what Anthem is and what our scope is we basically provide health insurance to about 40 million Americans in this country. About 1 in every 8 American we're providing health care benefits to. And those benefits in 2018 were over $70 billion in what we paid. We reached into 96% of the hospitals around the country and 93% of physicians around the country through our Blue Cross Blue Shield Association Blue Card program. Anthem had to navigate this industry, all the disruptions and trends that have been happening over the past years, and they're continuing to happen. We've been pivoting and thinking about how we're going to pivot to react to that transformation by starting those disruptions, by starting a transformation in 2017. That followed the entry later in 2017 of a new CEO, Gail Boudreau. Gail brought a point of view about how we're going to attack this disruption. She also brought a concept around culture and leadership that was going to allow us to pivot within Anthem. We focused quite a bit on the culture and behavioral change moving beyond legacy, but also to be more agile and nimble with product development. And we're working with IBM on our journey to leverage AI, automation as we drive to the hybrid cloud. All of this is to focus on the One Anthem transformation. So as you see over here, we've got 3 major disruptions that we're dealing with that this transformation is trying to attack. The first one is around consumerism. We're having to sell more to individuals. We're having to figure out how do we use data in the environment and AI to create a population of one, and how do we create personalization that connects to those members and has ability to change their health behaviors, and how do they become the CEO of their health? How do we change that thinking historically? We think about the second is around competitors. A lot of competitors out there. We obviously have the mega mergers that everybody's been seeing here recently. We've got a lot of new entrants, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple. Those are going to continue. And then we have all the IT startups. So there's never been a more robust technology startup environment than we see now in terms of IT healthcare. This all takes attacks at our traditional health insurance model, and we have to figure out how to react to that. And if something the size of Anthem can't change on a dime, you can't steer a big ship. So we have to figure out how to do that incrementally and how to be nimble within pieces of the company to move that. The third piece of this is around government. Obviously, a lot of it's driven by the Affordable Care Act, everybody knows about, new insurance marketplaces, regulations, and really the aging of Medicare. Medicare members are aging in every day at a higher ratio, and they're shifting from a fee-for-service model into a managed care model. However, there is a lot of optimism with the opportunities that the government regulation and what they're bringing to the environment is allowing us to do to innovate. Those are things like the Cures Act, things like Blue Button 2.0, things like the FHIR standard around interoperability and data exchanges, These are all huge opportunities for us allowed to aggregate data, not just within our own four walls anymore, but lots of external data, lots of social determinants of health data. All of that allows us to be what we want to be in the future, which is better health advocates to our membership. So that disruption kind of led us to our strategic focus about where we need to go and what kind of transformation we have to do. Through data, predictive analytics, and omnichannel experience, there's so much we can do as an organization to improve member health. That's where our focus sharpened on delivering better insights to drive better health and the outcomes of that. Our overall ambition has been to move Anthem from the concept of a claims administrator just providing insurance to a proactive health advocate that cares about the whole health of the person. We have to evolve as a technology-oriented company. That's a shift. This requires IT teams to partner with the lines of business to develop new products and revenue streams. When we embrace individual decision makers, we improve member experience, which in turn improves adoption, engagement, and the stickiness of our offerings. When it comes to managing data in the healthcare space, precision matters, particularly as it relates to the core processes that handle our workflows. As we modernize our systems, specific considerations to work through are privacy, functionality, speed, completeness of data, compatibility, standardization, and above all, security. We have developed what we call a unique data fabric within our environment. It helps to normalize, harmonize, and provide quality data across all of our internal systems with the capacity to ingest external data and link that to the unique patient. The benefit was reducing complexity and improving liquidity of that data so that all our users could leverage that data seamlessly. IBM helped integrate all the systems and platforms to provide a solid infrastructure foundation that provides interoperability both internally and externally. A big piece of that transformation had to be focused on our journey to the cloud. How are we going to get there? The cloud is the future from which many new businesses and products will originate. That new way of thinking is very different from our legacy way of thinking, and we have to transform and look at that as our context. Our primary goal with cloud is modernizing our infrastructure to innovate faster, support AI workloads, and create elasticity and resiliency. We started about a year ago. We have many more years to go, and as Ginny said, chapter 1, chapter 2, and I'm sure there'll be more chapters after that because it's going to be a continuous journey. Our initial talent was driven around technical debt. The mandate was to facilitate change while not disrupting our core business. Our approach was to start with automation of core processes and predictive analytics, increase reliability and efficiency. This has set a foundation for Anthem's transformation now and into the future. And so some of that impact is that we recently just hit the 1 million mark on issues resolved through automation without human touch. That's 85% of our high-volume issues within our compute infrastructure. That's massive. What that means is time and resources to reinvent our business and transform it into where it needs to be so it's not disrupted. We opened up predictive analytics to empower our help desks for ID teams and recommendations to make better decisions and to guide our members through their health. The goal is to continue to deliver better personalization and omnichannel experiences and to realize faster product innovation. We are moving our members toward proactive whole health as opposed to reactive care management. Of course, we're not done yet and know we have a long ways to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that was a really powerful story, and we're looking forward to digging deeper into that story in a few minutes during the Q&A. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next guest, John Granger, Senior Vice President of Cloud Application Innovation at IBM Services, and Gary DeLue, CTO of Nationwide Building Society in the UK. Welcome.
So thank you, Charlene. I'm John, he's Gary. Let me begin by introducing the Nationwide Building Society. So it's a 200-year-old institution and what you might call a mutual, I think, in the United States. Its main focus, therefore, as the Building Society name suggests, is mortgages, the provision of mortgages and retail banking. And I'm pleased to say that it's the biggest building society in the world and the 5th largest bank in the UK. Now, we in IBM have had a long-standing relationship with the society. We've helped them with their core banking implementation. We helped them build their internet bank. We've done mobile applications and much more. But I also ought to declare a personal interest, because not only am I thrilled that the Nationwide, the society, has been one of my longest-standing personal clients in IBM, but also I, as a young man, got my first mortgage with the Nationwide, and 18 months ago, my son got his first mortgage as well. So many Granger roofs have been financed by this fabulous institution. So I'm really pleased to have Gary here with me. And let me start, Gary, by saying, 200 years, in order to survive that long, you've had to adapt to the marketplace. And so tell us what the challenges are at the moment that you face.
Thanks, John. So the market is changing rapidly at the moment. And there's so many different drivers for that. But let me touch on three. So the first is changing regulation. And I think if I look back since the financial crisis, the regulators have become far more active. And they're trying to push us into different challenges. And some of the regulation that's coming out with things like GDPR and open banking are making quite significant draws on what we're doing, but also some of them are actually overlapping, some of them compete. So it's challenging for us to keep up. The second is changing competition. I think that regulation that's forcing more competition is now resulting in a whole new set of banks, or what we call neobanks in the UK, coming to the fore. So we've seen 30 of these rise up over the last 5 years, which is changing the landscape for us. But as well as that, you're also seeing fintechs, aggregators, a whole bunch of new organizations arising. And then the final one is changing customer expectations. So people now view banking in the same way as they view using Google or Netflix and so on. They expect us to be on 24/7. They expect us to digitize all of our services. And they expect us to build a resilient business.
So what then is the transformation agenda that you're looking to put together to meet those challenges then?
That's a great question.
Share that with us, yeah?
So again, a whole range of things. But one of the most fundamental things for us is, can we really radically simplify the core business? Some of those big banking applications, the payment systems, that sort of heavy iron that we've been running for the last 30 or 40 years is really complex. So how do we really simplify that, remove the risk and the complexity, and drive the cost down? The second is we need to build new cloud-native digital platforms to enable the ecosystems that are going to transform this industry. So these ecosystems are really going to change the way in which people see banking. We then need to convert all the data that we hold, and we hold a lot of data, but we need to make sure that we convert that into insight through the use of things like analytics and AI.
Yeah.
So how do we get the value from that data so that we can use it better, our members, our customers can also use it better? And then, most important of all, we need to change the way we do change.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to do this for a number of years now, but we need to really start thinking about how do we optimize the change delivery process so we're far more agile, optimizing for agility rather than efficiency.
So let's just finish up on that. Charlene was talking about culture and leadership and so on. Just start us off with how you think about the people agenda and how you guys have been approaching that in the context of what you can see is a massive transformation. Yeah,
that's right. So as Charlene said, culture change is really, really hard. Turning that tank around is a big challenge. And I think for us, we've just started leaning into that process now and seeing what we can learn from other organizations that we've been working with, like IBM and others. But one of the things that we've learned is if you actually make a number of totemic changes quite early on, signifying that culture change is underway, then people start to really rally behind that. That's really helped us. From the people side, we need to hire a lot of new talent. We've announced we're going to hire over 1,000 new engineers. But we can't forget the people that already work for us in our organization. So we also need to balance that by retraining our own people as well and making sure they've got access to the same skills. And then, again, importantly, we need to reframe the way that we work with our partners. We can't do everything ourselves. We know that. So we need to work out how do we work better together as we go forward.
Brilliant. Thank you for the introduction, Gary. Let's go and join the others on this deeply attractive couch.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, that's a good starting point. So we're going to go into some Q&A here. First question, I'm going to toss it to Tim here. How did you build the case for your transformation? And was there a tipping point where things moved into full swing, or was it more of an incremental process?
Yeah, so for us, after the backside of an acquisition that didn't go forward, we really saw that coming with a lot of disruption coming our way. And so transformation kind of hit us in the face that we must do it, and it was an urgent initiative that we had to drive to. So that's kind of how we did that transition. And to get going in 2017, we didn't spend a lot of time on strategy. We spent some time, but we knew that we had to be directional, and we had to create an agility in how we thought and how we shifted into doing things, because as we saw things changing, and they continue to have changed, We had to be able to adapt to that. Most critical, really establishing the clear mission around better insights for better health has been a constant. The idea that Anthem can use data and technology to aspire to more when it comes to helping and advocating for our members to pursue better health is really important. Today, the case for transformation is clear and has been really powerful and motivational for the leadership and employees. Anthem has a passion around becoming a health advocate for our membership. This is a tremendous North Star that our associates have really been able to get behind and to serve during our transformation. One of the things that was recently announced in the past few weeks is a partnership with IBM and others called HUN, the Health Utility Network, that has a diverse set of founders. IBM, CVS, Aetna, Cigna, Centaur, and PNC Bank that were just announced joining us as founders last Wednesday. None of this leadership in the marketplace would be possible if we're not making early transformation investments. And I would encourage, if you have time at 4:30 today, since I'll be there too, come hear about HUN.
Thanks, Tim. Tim, that's a great point. And you think about our mission, guiding principle has been, how do we elevate our partnership around working together and innovation? And that enables us to work together with agility, speed to better support, your strategy, to coin the phrase, better insight, better health. And I think the blockchain initiative we have together is a good proof point, how we're working together, and that's given us momentum, and that's been contagious in the partnership.
Yeah. Gary, what about nationwide? How did you make the case for transformation?
Well, I think the first thing we learned was you have to get really good at telling stories. So, by that I mean, being able to really understand the context that you're in, and then how do you build the fact base around that, and then how do you sell that to the board, how do you sell that to the exco, how do you sell that to the employees, sell it to everybody. If you can't create that vision and create the story around that vision, it becomes really hard. So ultimately, it's that story, but it's also a huge stakeholder management challenge. I think from my perspective, you have to bring everybody on a journey with you. You have to start thinking, how do I get that story out across the business and let everybody understand what their role is in that story overall? And to answer your question, you know when you're winning when you start hearing the messages that you've been sending out. When you start hearing those coming back to you, that's when you really know you're having some success.
Yeah, and I think I'd add two things that the society does really well. I mean, one is that you're very clear that transformation is a continuous process. So it's less about stop and start, and more about re-energizing the process. So think, spinning plates and having to nudge them when they're starting to slip off their axis. And I think the second thing in terms of getting the buy-in that you talked about, Charlene, is I think, as an organization, it really helps if you're very clear about your values and who you are, because the society is very focused on its members, it's owned by its members, it's very focused on its people and its responsibility to the community. So when you have to achieve buy-in and target difficult messages, I think you're really clear about where you need to go with it, yeah?
Yeah, good. So I'm hearing vision, stories. It's really bringing people together with these ideas.
Yeah.
It's really about the ideas and where you're going to, not even detailed plans.
Yep.
Okay, great. So what were the obstacles? And as I mentioned, the uncomfortable truths that you had to have and make. What were the uncomfortable decisions that you had to manage? Tim, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so and you touched on it, and Phil touched on it, being a company that's been around for a long time, and all of a sudden seeing that as something instead of praising is actually kind of a burden, right? Because you have a legacy of how you've been successful in the past, and that tends to keep legacy thinking around. And so how you change that and the way you're going to operate in the future is important. And to change that, it really has to be something inspiring, right? So something like Anthem becoming a health advocate, as opposed to thinking about an insurer, right? That doesn't necessarily always have the greatest connotation out there, right? But being a health advocate is important. And ultimately, a culture of speed, right? And accountability and empowerment helps us overcome that transition from legacy to aspiration. So, in keeping the team focused on behavioral change linked to that new culture, it's not just about publishing a culture or a mission and value and putting it on posters and throwing it up on walls, right, that people are walking by. It's about continually reinforcing behaviors and stopping those behaviors you don't want when you see them happen, right? Any of those things that are counter to that new culture. And you have to look for those opportunities very closely and act on them immediately.
Okay, what uncomfortable truths or decisions that you have to manage?
Well, I couldn't agree more with what you've just said, actually. I think, for me, one of the biggest things that we've learned from last year is we've focused really heavily on technology, but this transformation journey is far more about people and culture than it actually is about technology. So that's one of the things we've learned. I guess the uncomfortable truth for us is in building a technology strategy that is ambitious, our ambitions actually exceeded our ability to execute. And I think as we've started to get into the strategy now, we've realized the challenges for us is, how do we temper that ambition back a little bit and start to learn what are the things that we really can do well and what are the things that are challenging for us? Where do we need to raise our game and where do we need to sort of rein in some of that ambition? Try and find those balance points. But as we go forward, one of the other things I think we've learned in this as well is we'll get some things wrong. We need to become a learning organization. We need to fail fast and learn from that and move on. And that's going to be one of the key things I think that will really differentiate as we start to move on.
Yeah. So I really appreciate, again, the culture, the people aspects of this. But I also want to spend some time on the technology because we are here at IBM, right? So what are the approaches and technologies existing today or in the future that you think are going to make that transformation journey easier or better? And from how it could be done in the past, it could be like design, AI, cloud, blockchain, take your pick. So Gary.
You've just done them all, actually. It's great. Yeah. Fantastic. I think if I start, we've been on probably a 30 to 40-year journey in IT to go from the sort of big monolithic application estates running on big iron through to decomposing those into services and smaller services, service-oriented architecture, and then getting down into microservices. So the first thing really is around looser coupling of components, around building microservices and exposing them through APIs. And then how do we join all that together through service meshes? I think we've heard all that this week. That's a really big trend. I think once you start doing that, though, that becomes almost impossible for humans to manage. So the next step becomes, how do you automate that process? How do you help developers to make change happen within that context and help our teams to manage that? So then there's around the automation process around DevOps and the tooling for all of this. And then, of course, cloud. Everything we're now talking about is how do we go from cloud-enabled to cloud-native? So building the new cloud-native digital applications and doing infrastructure on demand as opposed to just migrating workloads into cloud. So for us, those are all important. But I guess the most important thing really is around changing the way we do change. As I mentioned before, I think we're changing the way in which we typically went from sort of the big programs and projects that took years and years before you started to see value now to more iterative approaches, doing early prototypes, proof of concept type work to demonstrate value quick on, to solve some of the architectural challenges, and then iterating quickly through MVPs and continuous delivery. So it's a really different way and different mindset and approach.
Yeah, so I'd like to build on that because I think one of the things that makes it easier now is about having a framework that gives you clarity about the destination. We're all faced with these waves of technology, and you enumerated them, Charlene, and Gary talked about them. But the point is that they're not an end in themselves. We talk about the journey to the cloud, for example, but to some extent, that's a misnomer, yeah? Because it's not so much getting to the cloud that is important, it's what you do when you get there. Yeah. So what we have is a framework for thinking about, what is the purpose of these technologies? How do they serve the competitive advantage of your organization? How do you marshal these disruptive technologies in the service of your strategy and in the service of competitive advantage? And we call that framework a cognitive enterprise. And so we see there are sort of 7 big capabilities that help you make sense of all of this. At its center are business platforms. And we think about business platforms as being that combination of people and process and data that gives you a unique competitive advantage. And those business platforms are then supported by cognitively enabled workflows and processes. And then they're powered by these big new exponential technologies like AI, like IoT, like 5G, fueled by data, and then sitting on a foundation of next generation enterprise applications, whether those are custom or packaged, and obviously then on a hybrid cloud secure architecture. And that's surrounded by a culture of agile innovation. And so we find, and I think that's what makes transformation easier, is taking all these different technologies and actually putting them into a framework that says, okay, this is how you marshal them. This is how you put them in service of your strategy and your competitive advantage. So I do think that framework makes it easier, Charlene, yeah?
Tim.
Yeah, I think those technologies are important as tools. I think this framework that John's talking about is really important because that improved management of technology allows us to focus on the future of our business and get closer with that business partnership as we think about that future. IBM has helped us, from the economies of scale in our modernization that can fund the future edge of what we want to create. This is resulting in more experimentation and incubators leveraging exponential technology. So it's making that space for investment and capabilities by having that foundation framework run more effectively.
And as Tim mentioned, we work together to collaborate and create a co-creation model, right? The first step we had to do is take a look at the entire estate across Anthem, and a lot of it is in the legacy systems. And so as we looked at the estate, we looked at how can we apply efficiencies, how can we apply automation. And when we received these efficiencies, then we used that as a funding model for their strategic imperatives around their digital transformation. So what we also did was then we aligned the incentives, the management systems, and the objectives. So we got everyone to work together in a collaborative way, everyone aligned together, and that agility allowed us to then focus on their strategic imperatives and really fund the future for their digital transformation.
Oh, it's interesting because you all have talked about how important it is that partnership in this, and that this is such a huge project between the technology, the culture, the structures, the incentives, everything. There's a huge amount of work to be done. So, Tim, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what's the value of partnership as you pursue this transformation, and in particular, what was the case of working with IBM services at Anthem?
Well, it's really nice to be in a situation where you have a long-term partner like IBM in your environment. Sitting there helping to keep reliability going, minimizing downtimes. It's been critical to allowing senior leadership to take more chances to push that technology edge, knowing that you have that foundation and that reliability. So as a partner, IBM has stepped up to taking full ownership and accountability with ensuring that stability while we modernize. We truly have a trusted relationship that has been solidified over the years of joint success. And as you heard with Ginny, at the keynote, right? The trusted partnership allows us to focus on the future of our business with confidence.
Yeah.
That's very kind of you.
It checks in the post.
No, but when you think, we're very fortunate to be able to team with Tim and the team. And actually, when you think about it, we have this relationship at all levels in the company. And it really is about the objectives, the alignment, the collaboration, and that builds the trust. And so to me, having the alignment and the partnership, and it really starts with Tim's leadership and in the communications that we have as a team, and all the teams work effectively at all levels, and that then drives higher value to your organization. So we appreciate your partnership in helping us enable that.
What about a Nationwide, John?
Yeah, look, so I mean, your question about partnership and transformation, I would go so far as to say you cannot achieve transformation without partnership, because transformations are long, they're bruising, they're messy, they're difficult. And if you don't have a real partnership, then one or other of you is going to check out along the way, yeah? So I think, in terms of how we work with Nationwide, there are three elements of that partnership that I think have been really important. I mean, first is that we've made sure that we give each other time at the senior levels. So Ginny meets with Joe Garner, the CEO. I meet with Tony, the deputy CEO. I meet with Gary. And we, on each side, we give ourselves the time. Secondly, I think it really helps in a partnership if your values align. I mean, when Ginny and Joe Garner get together, I'm always fascinated by the fact they spend as much time talking about how they're approaching common business problems as they are talking about, what technology and services, the society might like to get from us, and so on and so forth. And then I think the third thing, Charlene, is that you have to have real respect. And by respect, I mean straight talking, but also giving each other time to fix it. I mean, I remember way back with the society when we started, their deputy CEO called me up because the SAP implementation was off track. But he was very calm about it. He did not throw his toys out the pram. He just said, "Look, John, you need to go fix it." And he did us the honor of saying, "And you got some time to fix it," which we went and did. And then from there, we went from strength to strength. So I think those are the aspects of partnership that really make it work, yeah?
Yeah, Gary?
I mean, what do you think, Gary?
No, I agree. I think some of those battle scars are really important as well.
Yeah.
Actually being in the trenches together and learning together are really important. But as I look forward, if I think about the scale of the transformation that we're going to undertake, we can't do all that ourselves. So we really need partners, and we need partners that will stand by our side and go through the tough times as well as the good times with us. We also need to learn from the experts in the industry. I think one of the challenges is you can get in such a groove doing the thing that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it's useful to have that external perspective of people coming in and challenging you and saying, are you doing the right thing here? Should you be thinking about other things in this? for me, a really good partner is a critical friend. It's someone who's prepared to stand up and tell you the tough message that you need to hear at the right time.
Well, the last question, in a sentence or two, what advice would you give to the audience here as they embark or continue on their transformation journey? So, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to start with a clear mission that everybody believes in and is passionate about. Then it's about staying agile and flexible in execution, because we know one thing, especially in our industry, continuous change is going to keep happening, both in healthcare and in technology, and we're excited to be a part of that.
And Gary, close it up for us.
I'll echo that. I think create the vision, create the compelling vision, the really strong story about why you're doing it and what you're doing it, and so how you're going to do it. Take people with you on the journey, make sure you've got the buy-in across the whole range of the business and all the stakeholders inside and out of the business. And then, as I said before, optimize for agility, because, as you say, the one thing for certain is everything's going to change over the next few years.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the panel for their good thoughts, and good luck with you, and enjoy the rest of the day.